friends, it's time to start replacing our master cylinder. The master cylinder on this vehicle is going to be located on the driver's side right on the firewall. It's fairly easy to get to. We're just going to go ahead and move some of this out of the way. But before we start doing that, let's talk about something else. You're going to want to make sure that you have plenty of .3 brake fluid for this because, of course, we're going to have to make sure we get all the air out of this, and we're going to have to bleed out the entire braking system. With that said, you also want to make sure that you can open up all the bleeder screws on all 4 brakes. So let's go ahead and get the wheels up off the ground, remove them, then we're going to open up those bleeder screws to start. Now the process is going to be the same for removing all the wheels. To do that, we're going to remove this center cover right here. There's a little tab, you can get right in between there, remove that. Once you have that off, remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. Remove the wheel. As we start removing the wheels, I'm going to just continue on by spraying down the bleeder screws. We'll let that sit when we continue removing the rest of the wheels. Now at this point I have all the wheels off and I sprayed the bleeder screws with some penetrant. I let it sit for a little bit and we can try to open this. We're going to go ahead and try to turn this counterclockwise to break it free. There we are. Let's see if we got a little bit of fluid coming out. As long as you see some fluid coming out, you're good to go. Go ahead and close that off and do the same to them all. Now once you're sure all those bleeder screws opened up, we're going to get back inside the engine compartment here. You can pretty much access everything that you need to right up through this area right here to remove this master cylinder. But overall it's going to be easier if you just go ahead and remove this air filter housing along here, so that's what we're going to do. To start getting this off of here, we're going to disconnect our mass airflow sensor, that's this right here. To do that, there's a little tab right in the center of the connector. Go ahead and press down on that and then carefully pull this away from the air filter housing. Inspect it, make sure you don't see any funny colors. If you do, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. That looks fine, so I'll set it aside. Now let's reach directly underneath that. You're going to find a rubber hose that connects onto the box. Go ahead and gently pull off on that. We'll set that aside as well. You're going to find another small hose along this passenger side of this. Let's go ahead and give that a little tug, pull it off of there. Inspect that hose, make sure it's soft and pliable. Set that aside. Let's go ahead and pop this out of its bracket. There we are. Now we're going to move up to this hose right here. There's a clamp on this. Go ahead and grab onto that clamp, slide it up the hose, and then remove the hose from the housing. There we are. Let's start disconnecting the inlet tube from the throttle body. Use a 10mm for this. Make sure that's nice and loose. Okay. Now we'll come right over here. Go ahead and pop these clips. Lift up on this box, pull it towards you, and remove this unit from the area. Remove your air filter and inspect it. That looks okay. At this point, we have a nice clear view of our master cylinder. The next thing we're going to do is disconnect our level sensor. There's a little tab right where my thumb is. Go ahead and squeeze that in. We'll pop this off of here. Inspect it, of course. That looks great. Set it aside. Next, we're going to spray down our brake lines that go onto the master cylinder. There's one right here on the forward aspect of this, and then if you were to follow down along the driver's side, you're going to find another one. Spray those with some penetrant, let them sit. Let's use a flare end wrench, a 10mm, and we're going to start removing these lines. Just want to pop them free. That one broke free. Let's continue on to the other one here. All right, once they're both freed up, just go ahead and snug them real quick, and then we're going to drain all the fluid out of our master cylinder. Once you're sure both of your lines are broken free, let's continue on to removing as much brake fluid from the master cylinder as possible. I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. We'll set the cover aside. To remove the fluid, generally you can either use some sort of a vacuuming device, or if you happen to have like a turkey baster of some sort, you can just use something like this. Be very careful not to get brake fluid on your paint of the vehicle because it will actually remove it. What you might happen to find when you're trying to remove the fluid is that a lot of the fluid stays in on one side of it. This is going to be common. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and take this cover, put it right back on here. And then I'm going to put an absorbent pad underneath the master cylinder here because what we have to do is actually remove our brake lines from the area here, and then we're going to unbolt it and then we'll just drain it out. But there's going to be the possibility that some fluid might come out of this as we're working. That one's good. If you want to stop the fluid from coming out, you can remove the rubber boots from inside the new master cylinder and just go ahead and place them into the old one. Okay, get this line out of there now. Perfect. Once both of your lines are free, we're going to continue on to the mounting nuts. You're going to find a 12mm nut on this side and one over on the driver's side. Go ahead and remove the pair. Okay, there's one of them. Now at this point, we can go ahead and grab onto this area here. We're going to give it a little wiggle. That also has a line that comes around and it goes over to the driver's side, which is what goes into the master cylinder over there. Go ahead and pull that right out of the way. Now we can grab onto that master cylinder. Get it out of its position here. Right on the back side of the master cylinder, you're going to see that you have a clip for the wiring. Go ahead and slide that out of there and remove your master cylinder. Okay, with the master cylinder out of the way, the next thing we're going to pay attention to is the booster. That's this right here. Looking inside where the master cylinder was, you can see that there's some debris in there. I always like to get out the debris, but what we're also paying attention to is to see if there's any fluid. If there is fluid, that's from the master cylinder leaking, and it could potentially cause issues with the booster here. Ours doesn't have any fluid in it, so I look okay with that, but I just want to make sure I go ahead and get out any of this debris that I can. Also along the outer portion, I generally like to just kind of try to clean out around the outer portion right there. Now once you have it nice and clean, I always just take a little bit of grease and I'm going to go right along this little bobble right here. After that, I'm also going to get along the inner edge of this. This is going to help keep moisture out of the area so you don't have to worry about rust or corrosion or anything else building up inside this. Now the next thing we have to do is start bench bleeding our master cylinder. The reason why we have to do this is because there's all air inside the system and we need to make sure that we replace that with the .3 brake fluid. Otherwise you're going to have air in your braking system, which is no good. Now commonly you can go ahead and buy a kit that's going to have pretty much every fitting that you're going to need, and of course it's going to have some hoses that are going to be able to do the job. If you don't have that, what you do need to do is go ahead and find a fitting that does fit into the master cylinder. Alright, once you're sure that you got one that fits, you're also going to want some 3/16 brake line, and then we're going to go ahead and form a brake line so it goes from here up and down into the master cylinder. And it needs to go down as far as it can so it can burp out any air, and when it does draw in something, it's going to only draw in fluid. Now let's bring it over to the master cylinder. We're going to go ahead and start this right in here. And now we just need the brake line to come up and then all the way down in just like this line right here. So I'll just kind of form it a little bit. Get it so it's approximately where it needs to be, and then we'll cut it down. Okay, so I want it to go down at least halfway to 3/4 of the way into the master cylinder, so I'll cut it right here. Let's go ahead and bend that down. Look inside the master cylinder and just flex it down so it reaches down like I was saying. You want to make sure that it's going to be completely covered by the brake fluid when you fill this up. Now we can tighten up both of our fittings. And we're just going to go ahead and snug this up, make sure we're not going to have a brake fluid leak from this. Double check it, and then of course tighten up the other one. Okay, this is looking great. So let's go ahead and fill it up with some .3 brake fluid. We got to try to fill up both areas here. The next thing that you're going to want to do is either have a brass punch or even a wooden dowel, something that's not necessarily going to scour this area up right here. Let's go ahead and take this, and we're going to gently start pressing this in. We're going to push it in as far as we can, and what we're paying attention to is any air bubbles that are coming through these lines and then going down into the reservoir. As long as we're pressing this and we can still see air coming out, we need to continue doing this until we see no air coming out. We got a lot of air. Okay, that's in all the way. Release it. Now this isn't a race. You definitely just want to make sure you get all the air out. Super important. Okay, so I'm at the point where I'm pressing this in and out, and I'm not seeing any more air bubbles coming out. That's great. At this point, we can go ahead and get this off of the bench. We'll remove our lines, and we can get ready to start installing it into the vehicle. Over a collection bucket, let's go ahead and start removing these lines. There is going to be brake fluid that tries to make its way out, so make sure you're over a collection bucket and not over the paint of your vehicle. Are. Set that in there to drain. Do the same to the other one. If you want to, you can go ahead and put a little plug in here Stop that fluid from leaking on you. Drain that one out as well. Let's put our cover on there, protect that fluid. Now we can start putting in our master cylinder. When we do that, you want to make sure that you put it in before this bracket goes on. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide it right out of the way as I bring this down and in. Slide it onto those studs. There we are. Now we can take this bracket, start lining it up, but at the same time, we're also going to start putting on the line on the driver's side of the master cylinder. So let's go ahead and start putting that in now. Got to get it lined up before we start bolting anything in. Put that on there. Start screwing this in. So now that I have that started, I'm just going to go ahead and bottom this out, and then we'll continue on. Let's go ahead and get this one out of here. We'll start this one in and snug it up as well. Okay, that one's bottomed out. We can continue tightening it after we put on our mounting nuts. Start both of those nuts on and then snug them up. Now we can go ahead and snug these up. Once they're both snugged, we'll go ahead and torque them to 9 foot-pounds. Now we can take our level sensor wire. We're just going to bring it along the back side of the master cylinder. We'll slide it into that clip that's on the back, same as we removed it. After that, go ahead and slide it right in. Listen for a click, give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Let's just go ahead and double check those brake lines, make sure they're nice and snug. The next thing that I always do is clean up the lines right where they go into the master cylinder. The reason why I want to do this is because I'm going to go ahead and hop inside the vehicle, start pumping up the brakes, and then I'm going to come out here and I'm going to check to make sure I don't have any leaks on either of my lines. Hop inside the passenger compartment, pump up the brakes a few good pumps here. Check those lines, make sure you don't have a brake fluid leak, and then we're going to proceed by bleeding the brakes. Okay, so now at this point we're going to start bleeding our brakes. Before you go ahead and do this, you want to double check to make sure that your master cylinder is completely full with the .3 brake fluid and the cap is on. Now this is going to be easiest to do with 2 people. You're going to have somebody inside the vehicle getting ready to pump the brakes, and of course you need to have somebody out here at the bleeder screw to open it up and close it as needed. With that said, I'm going to have the person inside the vehicle pump up the brakes 3 to 5 times and then hold it. Once they're holding, they'll let me know and I'll open this up. Please hold, pump the brakes. Holding. Let's go ahead and open this up, and what we're watching for is fluid and air. It's very common not to see air right at the beginning because most of the air is going to be trapped up near that master cylinder. Go ahead and pump it again. Holding. Let's do this a few more times. Go ahead and pump. All right, so we're at the point where we have no air coming out of this bleeder screw, so we're just going to go ahead and close it off. We'll wipe it down, and then we're going to move along to the left rear. The process is going to be the exact same thing for each wheel. What we're going to do is do the right rear like we did, come here to the left rear, do this one, go over to the right front, and then end at the left front. Go ahead and pump up the brakes. Once you're sure you have all the air out of your braking system, go ahead and clean down your mess, and then make sure you put on your bleeder screw covers. Now let's go ahead and get our wheel on here. We're going to start on all of our lug nuts, bottom them out, get the wheels back on the ground, then we'll torque them all to 76 foot-pounds. At this point, we got the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Assuming you have your center covers, go ahead and pop those in as well. Do the same to all wheels. Once you have all your wheels torqued, let's get back up in the engine compartment. We're just going to double check that master cylinder. Make sure it's full to the maximum line, and of course check those brake lines and make sure there's no leaks. Assuming everything looks good, let's start putting the rest back together. Slide this in. I'm gonna put it in right onto the throttle body there. Slide it in as far as it can go. Now we'll start latching in this. Down along this inner portion here, you're gonna find some little hooky doos. You need to just go ahead and put them right in there. Tilt that, slide it in. Slide this down, latch it. Let's connect in this little hose here. If you forget about that, you're gonna have a check engine light. Connect this on here so it's secured. We'll get this on there, squeeze that clamp. There we are. Make sure your air inlet tube is completely on the throttle body. Snug it up. Double check it, make sure it's secured. Let's get this lower hose on here, the one that's underneath the mass airflow sensor. Make sure that's completely secured. And then plug in your mass airflow sensor. Listen for a click, give it a tug. Okay, friend, we got our master cylinder in there. What's left to do now? Now you're just gonna wanna go ahead and start up your vehicle. Make sure you don't have a check engine light. If you do, double check everything under the hood right here. Make sure you plugged in that mass airflow sensor and all of those hoses. If you forgot any of them, you're gonna have a check engine light. Aside from that, go ahead and take it for a road test. Make sure those brakes feel great. Thanks for watching.